Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Concordia University's Fourspace, and thank you for joining us today for today's event, Writers Read Presents Our Voices. To help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube Live from Fourspace, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. At Fourspace, we work with our university community to mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities to examine research questions and projects in development here at the university. And with that, it is now my pleasure to hand it over to Rachel Riley. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very gray March morning. I'm Rachel. I'm one of the Writers Read assistants for 2024-2025. Also a current master's student in the creative writing department. The Writers Read series, with the support of faculty in arts and science, invites renowned and emerging authors of both Canadian and international acclaim to read from and discuss the work that excites us. This season, we're focused on collaborating with local literary groups and on celebrating our accomplished community. Today is actually our penultimate event of the year. We have one more coming up on the 4th of April, which is a professional panel. So stay tuned for details on that one, and also polish up your pitches, maybe, subtle hint. Bringing things back to today, I'd like to thank Tamsyn, my fellow Writers Read assistant, for all her amazing work. A lot of it is behind the scenes, so you don't see all the things she does to facilitate these events. Also, the lovely Scenic Queries for 13 years of dedication to this to this series. And special shout out to Alex Schofield today, who we couldn't have done this event without her. She wrote all the lovely little intros for the student work that you're going to hear shortly. We are going to start with our student readers and then take a break for our catered lunch at 12. And we'll return at 1 to hear from our lovely faculty and alumni who could join us today. This event wouldn't be happening without the people who make our department, the students who submitted work, and to those who gave their feedback, time, and attention to their peers, the alumni who could be here and those that couldn't, the faculty who are ever generous with their knowledge and experience. Everyone gathered here today, thank you for making this space what it is. I think all of us in the creative writing department know that there is something special that happens in workshops when people are willing to share parts of themselves with the listening room. We hope we can embody that courage and care today. I'll just turn things over to Tamsyn to introduce our student readers. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tamsyn. I'm also a student in the creative writing program in my first year, and one of the Writers Read assistants. To start off with the readings, we'll have Shiko Gitonga. In Shiko's work, there's a narrative that oscillates between the biblical and the real. Shiko Gitonga exposes the difficulty of being a child in a household where there are ever-changing adult complexities. As the speaker navigates divisions of betrayal, Gitonga seamlessly depicts the dizzying personalities of perspectives of parents and house help. Religious upbringing battles with the dreamlike environment of bright and strange skies, faraway sounds, and rain that blotted out the face of the earth. The father's love shines as he imports wisdom through stories of ogres and talking animals, meant to warn and protect. The motherly love resonates as she sings boarding school songs to her children. As the speaker moves from childhood into early adulthood, the reader comes to terms with the twin states of innocence and guilt, where time holds myth, heritage, song, and family history in one continuum. Please welcome Shiko.
Hi, so trigger warning for this piece, there'll be explicit descriptions of child abuse. Feel free to leave. I am 3 or 4 when Cecilia comes to work for us. Years later, I will find photographs of her. She carries me at her hip, my leg dangling and my head turned away. She is thin with a shaved head and eyes narrowed in a quiet smile. She dresses like the other maids in the neighborhood, in a faded t-shirt and a long, unfashionable skirt. We call them house helps. In the cold mornings, they walk silently beside children in private school uniforms, dropping them off and then coming back alone to empty houses. They are village girls from the rural counties who have come to Nairobi and left behind their families, young siblings, parents, grandparents. Cecilia is not yet 20. My memory of this is in fragments. She lays out my sister and I, each on the opposite bed, and then gets under the covers with us, one after the other, so that one of us is watching or being watched. On another day, I'm alone with her. The skin between her legs feels rough to the touch, prickly. It leaves a faint smell on my fingertips. I tell my mother eventually. I go to her one day with that solemn, half-forced gravity that comes over children during times of disaster. I cannot remember her reaction, only that Cecilia stays on and there is no scene. My mother is the person to whom I give my questions, my pleas, my sobbing accusations. Once I asked her about what a classmate said, a kindergarten girl telling the rest of us what grown-ups do when they are alone, miming movements with her hands. I asked my mother, is it true? Sometimes my parents will wake us up late at night and have us kneel before them in the sudden brightness of the living room. They place their hands on our heads and pray aloud. God has pulled them from their sleep and spoken in the silent darkness, urging them to anoint us again. With my eyes closed, I feel the brief, wet flick of oil on my face and my bare arms. I hear my Father's voice recite again the prayer of Psalms 91. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. The eye of God gazes downward like a red sun, seeing from above the great canopy of roofs, the vain network of winding paths and highways, and the grid of windows through which human souls move like pinpoints of light. I hide away, lay my body out on the cold tile of the bathroom floor. I am small enough to fit between the wall and the ceramic curve of the toilet bowl. Dark shadows move across the ceiling and beneath the door through the little slit of light. The thin, faraway sounds of the outside world drift in and out as I lay there unseeing. When I get up, my thighs are numb from the cold. I touch myself until a numb release. Afterwards, I crawl away from my own body. Dark clouds blot out the sky. Rain falls heavily, running in streams along the roads, gathering the fallen rubbish, beating against roofs and window panes. The city lapses into a total blackout. From dark windows, the sky is bright and strange, and lightning comes in sudden flashes. On nights like this, I sit and wait for my parents to come home. The only light indoors is the weak yellow flame of the kerosene lamp, casting long shadows against the walls, leaving the far corners hidden in darkness. The sound of the rain is endless. For 40 days and nights, it rained, and the water rose and blotted out the face of the earth. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth. My father reads to us, his voice growing fainter as sleep comes like the slow approach of a dark, heavy tide. He tells us stories that his own grandmother told him by the fire in her hut, stories about talking animals and ogres that could pretend to be men. He says, the father told his daughters, never open this door unless you hear my voice singing. Karogakwa kana dogya kajerire twana tutatu nyamadhireti nyamato dhenge jiro wito higorera. Things were different for us, he says. He tells us about the sheep, taking the sheep out to graze with his brothers, about playing in the forest as the animals wandered. He points to a scar at the left side of one eye, small and deep. They thought I had lost this eye. I slid and fell. There was blood covering this eye. He and my mother speak together in Gikuyu, a language that I can only half understand. They were not born in Nairobi. They grew up on farms in rural towns. I wore my first pair of shoes when I went to Lenana, my father says. The other boys would laugh at the way I spoke English. My mother tells us only happy stories, sings to us the choruses that she remembers from boarding school. Cecilia leaves to go work for another family, a church friend of my mother's. Other house helps come and go. There is Auntie Mira, tough and wrinkled, who one day forces me to wash a pair of PE shorts that I wet during the school day. There's Caroline, a nervous girl who once faints away while locked inside the bathroom so that the door has to be broken down. There's Mukali singing from her stool in the kitchen, singing as she hangs up the clothes in the backyard sunlight. Her eyes are quick to fill with tears. Once I hiss at her, "This is my father's house, not your house." And she watches me with a mute, quivering look that rouses my guilt and my instinct to kick at a weak, flinching body, to kick its face away so as to hide from its flinching look. "He'll kick you out," I hiss, "just watch." In the streets downtown, child beggars stand in groups. I do not see them as children like me. We are different. My mother stops and presses a 20-shilling coin into my hand to give one of them. "Help the ones who suffer," she tells me. She sends out bits of money. She tells us the terrible stories of the women she has helped, women languishing in poverty, women in the villages, in the slums, who are dying, who have died, who are bitten like dogs, kicked out, left for dead. "Help the ones who need help, and God will bless you," she says. "God will bless the work of your hands." Mwikali stays longer than anyone else. My mother pays for singing lessons, pays to have her record an album of the gospel songs that she has composed in a little notebook. She watches me grow older, watches as I become quiet and inward, prone to fits of sudden rage where I scream at my parents. One day she knocks on my door and asks if she can come in. She sits beside me. "Hauna furaha," she says. I give her a smile to make her happy. When I am 15, I write down my sins on a piece of paper and then burn it on the flames of a jiko stove, bending down to watch the edges curl up like gray lace. I gather up the ash and swallow it. But God is already fading away. In a year, I will begin the habit of debating my father. By this time, my mother has mentioned in passing that Cecilia is dead, that she died some years ago. Her photographs remain in frozen time in some picture album left in the darkness of a storage closet. Furtively beneath the eye of God, we hide ourselves to experiment. When I am 8, the girl across the street comes to play. She asks if I know what mothers and fathers do. We kiss in the shadows of the top bunk of a double-decker bed. Awkwardly, we touch, come apart, not daring to remove our clothes or lie on top of each other. Eventually, we whisper about her. "She told me to do it," someone says, and then in a smaller voice, she describes it, how they kissed, how one hand was pushed beneath her waistband, and then quickly pulled away at the sound of a mother's footsteps. Silently, we stand and wait for her. She comes out, looking from one face to another, and then we begin to fling the stones we have gathered, wild to strike her, to break her skin open and see the blood run. But again, she is part of the set, everything half forgotten, as it is with all our enmities, quick and vicious, retreating only to return again. In peacetime, we have a big sleepover, almost 15 children, all of us walking together under the night sky, and the strange elation in the air, the novelty of not being called back inside. We chase each other in the atmosphere of peace and freedom. Crammed together in a living room, we play truth or dare, pretending at scandal, but actually keeping far from the edge, always backing away. We turn off the lights and play hide and seek in the dark, giggles rising and then falling away, and the sudden sound of a scuffle as someone is discovered. We live in a sleepy world of tarmac games and 4 o'clock afternoons, 4 o'clock cartoons, house help soaking the collars of our school shirts in bleach, calling us when dinner is ready, birthday trips to the water park, 8 children squeezed into my father's station wagon, and a Black Forest cake with my name in whipped icing. The afternoons pass long and cloudless, and we play, sometimes barefoot, often in the middle of the road, stopping to let the occasional car pass. We play until the sunset, until the night comes wild and strange, a sense of danger as we chase each other in the blue darkness. House helps come to stand at the doorways, calling out the names of specific children who may answer or stay silent, hiding themselves with quiet laughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiko. Next, we have Sabia Sayam. Sabia's 7-part poem is a study in the narrator's geographical and emotional tensions, where every sunrise I wake up empty, a crater or a chalk outline at a crime scene, yet is forced deep into the destabilizing landscape of war. Like the pervasive knowledge that the heart and the home can be splintered at any moment, the narrator takes strength from the bravery of a YouTube poet and declaring, home as distance, God as distance, as close as your jugular vein, or as far as the fountain in Tulkarm. Is poetry the means to the end, or another word for threat? The poet asks. Sayam investigates the real and fleeing families against the shallow performance of social media celebrities, challenging us to distinguish truth from triviality, to somehow water hope from grief.
One, every sunrise, I wake up empty, a crater or a chalk outline at a crime scene, pulled apart by the seam of an eyelash or a stretch mark, by that needle, that steel worm on a mission of trespass. I smile, but who put these teeth, tiny white colonies, in my mouth? I move forward, but why are my every 2 steps swallowed by sudden seizure? 2. And when I ask you, how are you? It's my family is fleeing to Baghdad, my family is fleeing to the mountains, and canaries are flying out of their mouths. The metro's cacophony of smells, oud, fresh bread, tear gas. In the pulse of the crowd, I stand stiff, like a match, waiting to get struck by something like love, something like action. This is how you shake the dust off your soul. The marriage of finger to trigger, forehead to prayer mat, lightning to sky, birthing thunder. 3. Midnight, and I'm watching Rafat Al-Adrir defy death in his poetry lectures on YouTube. He talks about how life creates art, imitates life, imitates art, how we trivialize what we write despite the muzzle of a gun breathing down our necks. Is poetry the means or the end? Is poetry just another word for threat? Is poetry just another word for control? 4. We love our martyrs. We pass ba'lawe out in the streets and trill our tongues for them, even when it kills the heart. The truck driver at the Jordanian border who took 3 dogs down with him, barking. The 2 newborns who were gone as soon as their birth certificates arrived. Joy isn't an emotion, it's a performance. It's saying, what did you do but return us to the soil, our place of genesis? What did you do but spit the word mercy out after chewing it for so long? 5. You can see Palestine from Jordan's end of the Dead Sea and from the road in Lebanon with the sign in Arabic and colonizer languages. It's like Palestine only exists in distances. A journey, never a destination. Home as distance. God as distance. As close as your jugular vein or as far as the fountain in Tulkarm, whose silver waters purify themselves from ash, palm leaves, blood. Men and women drank coffee and smoked with children at their feet before they got pulverized along the electricity lines. Sudden seizure. 6. Patience is something that can be mastered. It's all in the mouth. People starve for something real, but can't stop gorging on the fake. A woman reaches over a homeless man and a million Gazan children to dump her half-eaten breakfast in the trash. A celebrity's kiss rouses 1,000 sleeping beauties to spill their money on pistachio chocolate, but not to protest. Annihilation, my grief, is a frozen slab of beef I carry around in a plastic bag. It seems it will never thaw. My grief is a bell I beat in this silent whale belly night. 7. The jasmines died out front. Spring did nothing to heal me. I brush my hair. News headlines and soil fall out. My kufi cushions my feet while I pray. My friend says, dua is stronger when it rains. I just hope God can hear me through all of that thunder. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabia. Our next reader is Gladwell. In Gladwell's short story, Dreaming, the reader is invited into Bukembe to witness the curious return of a larger-than-life character. Sanja, the protagonist, once blazed with courage and life force. Positioned as the community's heroine, and previously accepting the rumors of her death, the delight and awe at her return is palpable as the children touched her hands, her dress, and all talked at the same time. Gladwell writes of the need for a hero in a landscape of migration, of the resonance of the dream, and of the profound need to believe in what might be possible. Ultimately, the charged witnessing of trauma is superseded by the tenderness woven into the embrace of love and community. Please help me welcome Gladwell.
Thank you. Dreaming. The day had frozen in the afternoon like a painting, the birds static in the sky, when a woman with insignificant features alighted from Samaria Mwema. She stood on the opposite side of the road, her hands on her sides. We didn't run to ask her if she was going to Nzoia or Mechumeru, or if she wanted to buy our roasted corn or plantain. Such people would bargain until nightfall. We sat tight on our motorbikes, our stalls, our shops, and waited for her to come to us with her need. She crossed the road, and we watched the feeble way she walked. Closer now, we abandoned everything we were doing and surrounded her. For this was no stranger, this was Sanja, who left our village 4 years ago for Saudia. We had buried a banana stalk after the news of her death reached us through one of the returnees from Saudia a year after her departure. We even went to Jomo Kenyatta Airport to identify her body, among other bodies coming from Saudia, but it wasn't there. One of the recruiting agents told us the authorities didn't allow her remains to leave the country because she plunged to her death and her body couldn't be salvaged. We shut our ears and asked him to stop talking. We cried all the way in the rented bus from Nairobi back to our village, and we did not eat during the entire 8-hour travel. Now in front of us, we had so many questions like, what happened to her hair? What happened to her body? What happened to her face? And what happened to her walking style? But we held our questions behind our tongues and stared at her. The children touched her hands, her dress, and all talked at the same time. Is it true that you jumped from a 15-story building, Sanja? Is it true that in Saudi they eat people? Why are you not talking to us, Sanja? What did you bring for us, Sanja? We pinched the children, but their curiosity swallowed the pain, and they tugged at her hand as she stood in the middle of us like a tree until we offered her a seat outside our shops and gave her a cold Fanta. The woman in our midst was not Sanja that we sent to Saudi, but a shrunken thing of dry skin and little flesh on her bone. She had a blank stare of a chicken that was being slaughtered, its eyes fluttering weakly. The Sanja we lent to those people was a woman whom nature had awarded with gracefulness in her height, a skin that glowed in the sun, and a smile so memorable, a woman who could make any man hand over his title deed. She dressed in clarity and guts that we, in this village, lacked. But the woman sitting on the bench that afternoon cowered in nature's presence, in our presence, with an unfamiliarity that was unsettling before our own eyes. She was diminished in psyche, spirit, and even it seemed to us that those people had eaten her hide and her flesh. When she had declared that she was going to Saudi as a receptionist in a big hotel, we frowned at her audacity to leave our little countryside town to a country that didn't even speak our language. We told her she had everything right here, a beauty shop, a host of suitors, including our area MP, and plenty of food. She said to us, I will return with millions and start a resort right here in Bukembe. When she got her visa, we knew we would find courage to travel to Saudi someday too, because she paved the way for us. She told us that she heard that the watchmen and cleaners in Saudi were paid like doctors and politicians. Now, Sanja's skin sagged like a cow's flank, and one would never know she was once a desirable woman of considerable flesh in the right places. One of us, her ex-lover, who had equally grown old because of drinking after she left him, was the first to break the spell binding all of us. What have they done to you, Halinjola? Sanja's eyes were empty shells, her lips cracked as she sat there, gazing beyond the gathering. Someone said we shouldn't ask her questions. Didn't we see she was tired from traveling all the way from Saudi to here? But her ex-lover, reeking of alcohol, repeated his question and was now standing very close to her. His own wife also watched in silence. We wanted to hear, even though we didn't show her. Some of us whispered that we shouldn't ask these questions because it was none of our business. But then she was our business. She was one of us, and she was our Sanja. Sanja did not touch the Fanta. We encouraged her to drink it, but it seemed to us that she had also lost a sense of hearing. Someone handed her a packet of scones, but she didn't reach out, so the Good Samaritan put it on her lap. We looked at her overgrown blackened nails, a thing we had never seen before. She used to say that looks paid, which was true because there was a day she went to a political rally in Kandui and the area MP's eyes found her. We heard he gave her lots of money. She took it and told him we needed piped water in Bukembe, and he brought piped water shortly after. She laughed every time we called her Bibi Amuhesh. At the time, we could smell riches on her, and we knew she was going to succeed in life. Sanja now stood abruptly and walked through our gathering, leaving behind a faint smell of sweat and not the Limara perfume that used to announce her arrival and departure. We walked behind her, some of us asking each other when she was going to say something, some of us shaking our heads, some of us mouthing that her head wasn't correct. Someone ran ahead of us and to fetch her mother, who was drinking not far from their home. She caught up with us on the narrow path opposite the dispensary. Breathless, she grabbed Sanja and hugged her, but Sanja was like a wall. Taken aback, her mother also said, "What have they done to you?" Her mother held her hand and they walked on as we followed. In their compound, we sat talking in low tones, giving the two women space as they remained in the house. Some of us said perhaps she had come with lots of money and didn't want us to bother her. Some of us said that while in Saudi, maybe they did surgery on her, that's why she wasn't speaking. Someone said that was a very stupid thought. Someone else said we should wait for her to rest, gather her thoughts, and let us know about Saudi and if she was going to set up the resort. Some of us said there would be waiters and waitresses in her resort, or they would supply onions. Darkness started seeping in, and we went away with our questions. Some of us went back the next morning, but Sanja did not leave her room. Her mother told us She had not uttered a single word nor eaten anything. We didn't know how to penetrate Sanja's world because we didn't know how to handle a quiet, pensive her. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladwell. Our next reader is Emma Mossbrander. In Emma's poem, In Search of a Word, the speaker asks what is understood in the idea of searching. As they declare, something is inoperative, something is on display, they meditate on a group of roofers seen from their office window, turning nail guns and canvas corners on their lyrical heads to travel through the blue on the hook of a crane. Their ears supply the harmonics from the ringing of machinery. Emma expands the perfunctory work of hands, where roofers gather and wave and catch, mothers pull a child in an unstoppable forward march, and Emma lyrically interrogates what would happen if we stopped. Please help me welcome Emma.
From my office window, I watched the roofers. They worked many days with their reflective strips and fire guns, white clouds sliding down behind them. Cumulus from Latin heaped, sky, the abode of God, no longer, but the eye still lingers in wonder to find it occupied. In moments of inertia, I do virtual work. In sheer and bending moments, I diagram a puff of breath. I volunteered to give feedback about the website. I was excited to talk to someone called the information architect. I spoke about the problems of categorization. I clocked her displeasure. She tried to usher my input toward a foregone output. She was put out by my input. The roofers worked many days across from my office window, grinding and buzzing and clanking. I focused on a low tone, produced by a machine I couldn't see. My ear supplied the harmonics, a ringing I could phase in and out. Sky darkening to blue early, my own face and filing cabinets assert themselves in the pane. The eyes of the office buildings turn transparent, revealing a maze of lit-up tubes. This person sees the good in me and likes me. This person sees the bad in me and dislikes me. Therefore, I am. I became flustered and said something that made everyone uncomfortable. Therefore, I am. Heavy lamps glow over Saint Laurent as whale-shaped clouds try to smother the pink horizon with their bellies. Branches dripping with cherries shelter the gravel path next to the garage, and in the US, Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Exposed yellow insulation with incandescent gray moss growing over it in patches makes its own sunset on the side of the building. A passive panic, a petulant frustration. I wish this weren't happening. I don't want to be responsible for this. We make ourselves so miserable. Should I change my plans, check in with someone, perform a righteousness? My friend is a lawyer in New York. Should I text her? And say what? Shit show, am I right? Has the advantage of being both inadequate and annoying. It's easier to feel guilt than to try to organize a collective resistance, dedicate my alone time to this. I organize my resistance inward. It operates like a handbrake, dragging. A child wanting the ground with all its weight, going limp in the aisle, dangling by one arm. Mother's fingers clamping the wrist, the forward march. What would happen if we stopped? The mother engine fueled by tension, all the muscles and sinews carefully calibrated to operate a body motivated strictly by sticks and carrots, where carrots are strictly speaking just another kind of stick. Trying to record what I had in mind, watching clouds slide down the sky. The roofers must first rip up the old surface and gather the scraps in a square of cloth that becomes a sling when the corners lift and attach to the crane to be carried off. Then they can roll out the fresh asphalt, smooth and clean, and fold it over the edge like sheets on a bed. Dark birds scatter lawfully like iron filings. What rule organizes their relative positions in flight? A family dynamic. In thrall to the wind, each other, and their own aspect ratio. Nothing is exactly right by our standards. What do they see when they see each other? Page goes in search of a bird. Cage goes in search of a word. In the plateau, a pile of horse shit occupies an entire parking spot. In the McGill ghetto, a woman has been stabbed. Not surprised, mutter the students, milling around behind the caution tape. Further downtown, a tall 20-something in wide-legged pants and black lipstick is perched on a blue fire hydrant, posing for photos. They make the hydrant look small between their legs. Why are some hydrants blue? The blue ones are more powerful. Perhaps they know that. Perhaps everyone does. In Park X, someone has left a single lace handkerchief on the clothesline. To the right of the church doors, no one comes to the Father except through me. White exhaust from the PVC pipe below my window comes as close to thinking as anything, twirling and pivoting across the brick, about face and out to the sky. How lush this rush of blue, noticed and ignored. Circulating translucent indents like the footprints of water striders on the surface of the globe of the eye. I'm interested in structure because I want to know what is holding me up, allowing me to stand. What ties me to meaning, why I care to be intelligible, why I need others to know me in the day-to-day, the sounds I hear, the juxtaposition of the various lexicons of capitalism in whatever phase we may say it occupies in itself, like a moon. Say late, say crisis, say full force, progress, implosion, apocalypse. Play of light, play of shadow. The cuticle of sky in a liquid in a cup. Back again, day after day, the roofers move around, up and down the stairs and the ladder. Some wear hoodies, some wear coveralls. I forget them for a while, absorbed in my tasks, then find my eyes following the pale canvas, slack now, like a rigging mistake. A sail collapsed in the hanging lake.
Thank you, Emma. Next up, we have Nikki Taylor. Nikki's nonfiction prose examines the enduring beliefs of the Catholic religion as rewards and comforts to the believer. In this intimate and vivid family depiction, ghosts and symbols radiate from collective agreements as family members embrace and reaffirm certain beliefs. The speaker refuses the anesthetized certainty of an answer, yet they infuse compassion in their nonfiction, highlighting the circumstances around spiritual need. The speaker stands physically by their grandparents, by other family members, and by the process of death itself, while studying the moments where Catholic mythology lends its shoulder to grief and loss. Both inside and outside, their critique of loved ones is pivoting on tangible compassion. As the speaker says, she begged for death and for heaven, and in the end, she was delivered to where exactly none of us can be sure. Please help me welcome Nikki.
Thank you for that introduction. And thank you to Writers Read for having me. And to my fellow readers. Okay, I'll get into it. Okay, yeah, a weird part of this essay is that it's about the salmon migration cycle, and that is an allegory for the Catholic mythology around death. That's all I'll say. But to me, the thrust of the salmon's Catholicism lies in their dying. That in death, both salmon and Catholics occupy a teleology of return. The salmon go home to die, and in death, Catholics go home too. My paternal grandmother died before I was born. An Irish Catholic from Lanark County, she prayed the rosary nearly every day of her life, and probably never missed a Sunday service until she developed an aggressive form of colon cancer in her 60s. I am told that she died in hospital with her children at her bedside. Hand in hand, they prayed through her final hours. "Please, Lord, take me home," my grandmother pleaded. She begged for death and for heaven, and in the end she was delivered. To where exactly, none of us can be sure. When my maternal grandfather died 3 years ago, it was the same. What I remember most from those weeks when he was dying is my family's Catholic mythology. My grandmother pleading with God to bring him home swiftly. The nurse who told my mother that she had seen a figure in the room with my grandfather, and my family's ensuing speculation about who it might have been. His father, his brother, Ticker, a saint, Aloysius, Joseph, or had it been God himself? One thing was certain. Whomever the figure had been, he was there to beckon my grandfather home, to give him permission to leave the world behind, to show him the way. To be fair, I thought it was absurd that a nurse had told my family something so incredulous amidst their grief, but I didn't care. The figure and the speculation it had brought with it comforted them as they watched him die. God had not forsaken my grandfather, he had sent for him. My last living grandparent, my grandmother Louise, is perhaps the most pious of them all. She is from the old Quebec, which means she is probably the most Catholic person I have ever met. Her mother gave birth to 22 children. The last one killed her. My grandmother was just a toddler then. She would be an orphan by the time she was a teenager. Louise was born with a speech impediment, and because of it, she spent a lot of her childhood in hospitals, where they would try to correct it by means we now understand to be cruel and archaic, like electroshock therapy. Their efforts were unsuccessful. She met my grandfather during a period in her life when she was considering becoming a nun. It's a romantic story. She and a friend were driving on the Ontario side of the border near Temiskaming when their car broke down. The nearest place they found to ask for help was my grandfather's hunting camp. But he and his troop were from southern Ontario and didn't speak French. My grandmother and her friend didn't speak English, so the parties found themselves without a shared language. Other means of communication would have to be wielded. What I wouldn't do to watch the ensuing scenes. Louise recalls wondering which of the men she could trust. She checked the hunter's hands for wedding rings, lest she become some man's other woman. On my grandfather's fingers, she found none. Louise decided to stay close to Leroy. Despite their lack of language, they were drawn to each other. After they parted ways, my grandfather sent my grandmother letters. My grandmother taught herself English so she could respond. They visited one another. Louise didn't fall in love right away, but Leroy was gentle in his persistence. Eventually, they agreed to marry, and my grandfather, who had until that point been a Baptist and had not thought a tremendous deal about any religious denomination at all, agreed to convert to Catholicism for my grandmother. He made a decision about what to believe. "God's God," he'd say. "Don't make much difference to me." My grandmother's family was tickled by Leroy. "You're marrying a king?" they laughed, willful in their mistranslation of my grandfather's name. They knew he was a carpenter and a factory worker. He was as working class as they come. My grandmother's family was very petit bourgeoisie. They married in Montreal in 1959 at Église Saint-Viateur d'Outremont, where my grandmother's brother was part of a Jesuit order. He officiated their wedding. Later, he left the priesthood for a woman he'd fallen in love with. The first winter I lived in Montreal, I sought out the church my grandparents had been married in and embarked on a pilgrimage to this place to which I owed my very possibility. The church had limited hours, as most Catholic churches do these days, but on Tuesday evenings, a mass was offered. Clad in my pink wool balaclava and my navy burgundy bomber, I trudged through the December snow from Little Italy to Outremont. I wasn't going home that Christmas, so I would send my grandmother photos of the church's interior as some kind of consolation. I knew how much it would mean to her, precisely because she couldn't go back. My grandmother is arthritic, frail, but most of all, she is exhausted. She will never return to Quebec unless one day I bring her ashes here. The church's interior was grandiose and flamboyant, as Catholic aesthetics often dictate. Not unlike the Sistine Chapel, there was a mural on the ceiling. There were sculptures carved from oak and gold accoutrements everywhere. In typical neo-Gothic fashion, several stone pillars propped up the upper chambers where the organ looked out over its domain. Wanting to be at least a little respectful, I had arrived early so I could take photos before the Mass began. The pews were largely empty, save two older women who looked with great disdain at my traipsing around the church taking photos. Discretion was impossible. Every step I took echoed through the church, no matter how faint. The longer I loitered, the more ire I drew. I lit a candle for my grandmother without depositing the suggested $5 donation, and I left. That my grandmother's belief in heaven is so wholehearted, it constitutes the purest form of knowledge, brings me great comfort as she tiptoes slowly towards death. Ultimately, her belief is a wager without consequence. Either she is right, and in death her spirit will be whisked away promptly to commune with God in his eternal kingdom, or she is wrong. If she is wrong, her error has no subject or object. Both she and her mistake will no longer exist. She will not be there to know the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Next up, we have Sabrina Papandrea. Sabrina's poems examine the psychological and physical fissures of connection while narrating environments thick with theological. In Bleach, the speaker is in a continual state of self-navigation, in a need to discern cause and effect, staring at people's teeth to tell whether they're or not they're a good person. In Boy Shit, the speaker continues this exploration, invoking a myriad of ways in which people search for truth, where cause and effect seem disconnected. Playing a game of chance gets you all the right answers. In Artist Booth, Papandrea demonstrates that insolence can be the name of an artist booth and a manifestation of its literal definition. The speaker becomes doctor, therapist, and prophet to an audience willing to pay for nightmares. In this trio of poems, Papandrea's voice becomes the surreal reflection of wit and heart, wrenching spellbinding concoctions from the everyday. Please help me welcome Sabrina.
Hello, thank you. That intro was beautiful, Alex. Okay, this first one's called Artist Booth. I'm opening up a booth at the artist market. I call it insolence. It's a concept. I act out your worst nightmare and sell it to you for money. Tell me about your last big letdown. How could it have been worse? Give me $5. I bring filter coffee as an extra. I'm making everyone drink regular milk. I tell the vendor this is the happiest and most miserable I've ever been in my life. I'm getting a job as a doctor and removing someone's spleen. The man on the table is the love of my life. By his bedside, I say, I'm cheating on you. He says, what? I whisper, you're only dreaming. I'm a textbook gaslighter. I'm still selling experiences. At the hospital, I'm a medical actor who looks just like your sister. I tell you I'm dying. I check off cause life-altering pain from my short-term to-do list. I'm reading your psychiatric transcripts. I send them in a text chain, then add, sorry, that wasn't for you. I'm booking gigs all over the city. I'm adding music and calling it multidisciplinary. I'm harnessing the power of song. I open someone's mouth and spit in it. I wrote to the local newspaper about my artist booth. I call it a fucking masterpiece single-handedly rivaling the works of Bach, an integrative project forever collapsing the distinction between arts and science. I sign it off, yours truly. I got your text 6 hours ago. I won't read what it says. I don't even know you. I replace the coffee with bone broth. I never get sick because my system has acquired the antibodies to fight off every virus that has ever existed. I have years on your sister. I'm using a selfie stick to take pictures of me at the booth. It's making it look like someone else took them. In a way, they did. I'm taking it a step further. I'm adding a 15% increase to provoke tears. I'm calling it a cathartic experience. I add become a prophet to my long-term to-do list. I check it off immediately. This one's called Bleach. I don't find anything intriguing about other people, so I don't bother getting to know them. I get so bored of talking. I want to clean my apartment and make necessary changes. I'm gonna wash the walls. I love pouring bleach all over my hands. I communicate the power of bleach. I post bleach and its properties to an internet thread. Also, I'm looking for the perfect bucket. I want it to be blue, a blue bucket. I'm going to the home hardware store. The guy sells me 3 packs of bleach, a bucket, and a fire alarm. I'm gonna pull it later. I pulled the fire alarm on a bus one time and didn't move. I blamed it on a senile old man. Why'd you do that? I whispered. He said, I don't know. Now I'm installing one in my living room. My roommate goes to a lot of raves. She's on the safety squad. She says you shouldn't put sodium hypochlorite directly in your mouth till I show her how to whiten her teeth with it. When I talk to people, I spend most of the time staring at their teeth so I can see if they're a good person. They never are. I notice a pattern that I'm apathetic towards tiny women and don't blame myself for it. I turn to my bucket, wish it was metal, and only then I feel shame. The manual for the fire alarm installation is long. Avoid corners where the wall meets the ceiling and where pockets of dead air sometimes form. Turn off the power, cut the holes, run the wire. I cross this out and rewrite the entirety of Holes by Eileen Miles over it. I black out AFC 100 Fire and title it something else. I add an epilogue that reads, I'm always thinking of dead air, never knowing what it means. Thank you. This is my last one. It's called Boy Shit. We were looking for something fun to do. I dragged you to a book launch at 8. It's at this bar, there's an opening act with a puppet in a fake window. You're talking to strangers, explaining how your mom's Catholic upbringing excuses her for being such an uptight bitch. You still believe in God and you're not afraid to say it. We're heavy drinkers, we're partying with that girl we hate who won't stop talking about her dumb thesis project. Her boyfriend's fucked. He has a terrarium of snails that aren't even his. You aren't supposed to keep snails like that, I said. They'll shrivel up and die. He pulls up a Reddit thread and I knock his phone out of his hands because I don't care. I call this an accident. We're playing a guessing game and getting all the right answers. We're talking about doing oxy. We both loved taking it. I, because I got my gallbladder removed, because I had gallstones, because I developed an eating disorder. I keep calling it oxytocin. You pulled me aside, it's Oxycontin, by the way. Oxytocin's like a hormone or something. That made me sad till you said, but it's all the same letters. We end up in someone's barn talking about the Giller Prize. This writer we know released a book in 2024. You're just so much better than hers. You're writing about real shit, the kind of shit she's never even thought about. You know so much about anorexia. This summer you moved here, I was living in the suburbs and working at an Old Navy. You had an apartment in Verdun. You rode your bike by the canal and took home this guy having a manic episode. He slept on your couch for weeks, melted your kettle, then scaled a tree to get away. That same year you carried a sectional onto the metro. It was before you knew the rules. They made you walk it home since it was between 3 and 5. That guy was my neighbor. His dad taught me physics. I carried a cake onto the metro and dropped it on the ground too. I tell everyone in the barn. The first time you got your heart broken, you got really into hockey. The next time it happened, you got into cocaine. Tonight, your team lost by 3 and you don't even care. You're so over bullshit. You're so hot in those jeans. You're a genius if I've ever seen it. You have a plan for the future. You're gonna move home and start an artist guild. You don't wanna write a fucking thesis. You don't need a terrarium. When you were 20, you and your friends waterboarded some guy for fun and because he wanted you to. He only lasted 10 seconds and you call that boy shit.
Thank you, Sabrina. Our next reader is Alana Dunlop. Alana's short story, Bridget, takes the reader on a tense and magnetic roller coaster as the narrator herself rides the trajectory of a wild relationship. Dunlop introduces Bridget, a fascinating character with the ability to flow between constructs of trust and juxtapositions of betrayal. Though the narrator declares in the first line, it's actually pretty hard to construct a good lie, Bridget is a master of the craft in this story within a story. As Bridget reveals her mastery of piercing through the interiors and exteriors that are the lives of those around her, readers watch the speaker peel truth from fantasy. As the narrator navigates the ethics of a before and after, the challenges of heart and head battle for the idea of happily. Please help me welcome Alana.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thanks for the introduction. This is Bridget. It's actually pretty hard to construct a good lie. I learned this when I was sitting in a beige hospital chair, my skinny arm outstretched, purple at the spot where the wiry IV cord met my skin. I was in one of those phase 0 studies for money. They were testing an antiviral drug, letting it bubble through my body, even though it had only been tried on rats previously. When you're sitting around waiting for a reaction to happen, you can't help thinking up lies. I'm a pilot. I'm good at crosswords. I like the same music as you. I feel like a stable human being. Bridget sat in the chair across from me. I don't believe you, she said. She had a purple cast that glowed in the dark. I wondered how she was eligible for this study with a broken limb. She struck me as the type of girl to worm her way into anything. She was short and blonde, with bleached eyebrows and big boobs that I was jealous of. We got bored in the hospital, Bridget and me. It was a week-long study, and the dog-faced nurse wouldn't let us look at our phones because it would mess up the EKG. I couldn't figure out what heart-leaping content she thought we were consuming. All we got to do was walk around the research wing of the hospital, which looked so new it could have been a plastic reconstruction of a hospital, enlarged to life-sized. The other option was to write in the gray striped notebook that Bridget stole from the hospital gift shop, but I couldn't write. It was like the antiviral drug was chipping away at my brain. Most of the time, we just opted to sit and stare at each other. She was beautiful, and I didn't mind. Bridget started telling me more and more about herself. As she talked, she scrunched her nose so it wrinkled like a seashell. Her dad was a millionaire. He made all his money from a multi-level marketing scheme for weight loss milkshakes, and then he bought an island in the Atlantic Ocean. He met his second wife in Terminal 1 of Chicago O'Hare on a layover. Her dad doesn't talk to her anymore because she shared an article about a lawsuit against his company on Facebook. One time when she was 12, she spat in a boy's eye after he tried to grope her. A known sex offender had once driven her to the gas station. All her cool artist friends call her Hands because she's really ambidextrous. She needed the money from this study to revive her band Bareback's career after they had lost all their equipment in a fire. I'd never met anyone so exciting. She stretched her body across the chair, her pale stomach twisting and bending like a snake. Her eyelashes were orange and long, streaking the window when she pressed her face against it to see the sunset. When she laughed, her belly button blinked, like it was laughing too. When Bridget and I finished the study, the dog-faced nurse scowled at us and gave us our clothes back in plastic bags. We walked out the glass hospital doors, and Bridget turned to me and asked to move in, just for a bit, until she could find a suitable van. I still lived with my ex-girlfriend. We were civil, but often the atmosphere was tense, the air prickly and heavy, like at any moment lightning could rip through the apartment. I tried my best not to eavesdrop on her conversations with her online therapist, whose crackly voice carried through the thin wall between our rooms. I was saving to move out, and not just out of the apartment, but abroad. I wanted to go to Ireland. I wanted to go to grad school for writing. But when Bridget asked me, I said yes. You can't say no to Bridget. Bridget was messy. She left half-eaten bowls of pasta crusted with red sauce all over the living room. She sang loudly and slightly off-key at all hours of the day. She slept like a skydiver, all her limbs flailing out on the couch. She became interested in tattooing and ordered a needle on Amazon, piled the living room with sketches and bottles of ink. My skin was always sore because I let her tattoo me. It felt good when she clutched my arm in her bony hand. My ex-girlfriend, sighing while eyeing the disaster in our living room, called her Behemoth Bridget. Sometimes I felt like she was trying to take over my life. She wore my clothes. She started talking the same way I did, mimicking my Ontarian accent, popping like and literally into all her sentences. I even caught Bridget telling my ex a story that I had told her during a study, a story about me, except she pretended that it was her story, that the events had happened to her. I pointed it out, but Bridget was so animated, so convincing, that my ex believed her more. So when Bridget tattooed on herself the same tattoo she'd given me, a crooked black heart on her hip bone, then showed it to me proudly, exclaiming, "I did mine even better than I did yours," I told her it looked like shit. She asked me for money to get it removed since she spent all of hers on the tattoo gun. For the first time since I'd met her, I told her no, and I watched her face contort with defeat, like a crumpled bedsheet. I was preparing for a new study when I caught Bridget with my ex. I was eating healthy, vaping instead of smoking, not writing but thinking about it. I came home from a run and heard Bridget whimpering, and I knew she was having sex with my ex on the same bed I used to, and I knew she was doing it to bug me. I heard my ex yell cartoonishly, "Bridget, you're so emotionally mature and great at hooking up." I was sure Bridget had told her to say that. Later that day, I pushed my ear to the wall and heard my ex telling her online therapist that it was so easy to be with Bridget, easy in a way it never was with me. Bridget was fun and uninhibited, and she didn't ask for much, but she's very giving in bed, my ex added, giggling. I told Bridget she had 2 weeks to find a new place to live. She stuck her tongue out at me. The next 2 weeks were punctuated with Behemoth Bridget pouring bleach in my cereal, Behemoth Bridget calling me a cunt, Behemoth Bridget burning holes in the wall with a Zippo lighter, Behemoth Bridget leaning in close to my face, telling me to kiss her, and then jumping away at the last second. I was fed up and finally Googled her. Bridget Bartholomew. She was from Kelowna, BC. She didn't cover her tracks. Her dad was looking for her. He had never been to Chicago. Bareback released an Instagram statement claiming they don't know and have never known Bridget Bartholomew. Nothing of Bridget Bartholomew's had ever burned. She had a court date in 2 weeks for Grand Theft Auto. In pixelated newspaper photos, Bridget Bartholomew was captured on a security camera, popping the door off a chrome Mitsubishi and going for a joyride. Watching her sprawled out on the couch, orange eyelashes draped on her cheeks, I didn't know whether I loved her or hated her. I sent her dad a Facebook message before I could think twice. Behemoth Bridget left my apartment in a cop car. I thought she would put up a fight, kick and scream, scratch at the officer's eyeballs, but she was silent, glaring at me from the window. I watched the car disappear over the bridge, its red and blue lights blurring into the glow of duplexes in the distance. I didn't know it at the time, but she had my credit card in the back pocket of her jeans. The whole way back to Michigan, where she would go to reunite with her dad and await trial, she was tapping viciously on her cracked iPhone screen, her nails clicking against the glass, buying things I couldn't afford, a vac pack machine, a $1,000 men's razor, a 100-year-old bottle of wine. She bid on Liz Phair's underwear on eBay and won. She donated $200 apiece to random right-wing political campaigns, and I was spammed with emails from a mayor in Florida thanking me profusely. She sealed my fate for me. My credit score plummeted. I couldn't move out. My ex and I stayed living together, stewing in the sour air of her absence. She did all this, I imagined, with a soft smile on her face, thumbing the embossed letters on the card which spelled out my name. I think of Bridget sometimes, imagine kissing her lips, running my fingers from her forehead to the split ends at the bottom of her hair. I imagine what I'd say to her if I were to call her and reach her in Michigan or jail or in some other girl's apartment. I've sifted through all the lies, jotted them down in the notebook she gave me, started to form sentences, alternative realities, tried to explain the complete destruction of my life, the debt, the times I've cried on the phone to useless but sympathetic bank employees. I think I figured it out. I would say, listen, you are a mean, bitter girl, then pause for dramatic effect, but that was a brilliant story. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Next up is our last of the student readers, Lina Palacios. Lina's poems are sharp interrogations of the speaker's recognition and refusal to accept settler trauma and systems rife with letdown. The desire to connect and the connection with desire pulses through these poems. In Shitty Sonnets, aka Not Another Decolonial Love Poem, the speaker's undead, deadpan elders are hovering within consciousness, warning the speaker against dropping acid with cats on my deathbed. You will regret it, they know too much. Please help me welcome Lina.
You all are giving me life. I had to actually put this crazy lipstick on, just like, because I was like, man, I was so inspired. I think we all know her Bridget. So, yeah, Bridget, man, Grand Theft Auto. Oh, yeah. So thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the readers. You all are giving me a lot of life right now, and I need it. Probably need my water bottle too, but whatever. Shitty Sonnet number 1. The Miseducation of Melly Mel E.O., AKA Not Another Decolonial Love Poem. I don't even know what title it is anymore, but maybe you can all help me decide later. Melly Mel and I were preggers, single, broke. 14-year-olds in La Primavera de Rodney King's 1991. Tummy, boobies, swollen foot, acid reflux choke. Sin vergüenzas hustling hard to hide from everyone. No sex ed in school. We thought pulling out would do. That bullshit fucked me over. Did it fuck you up too? Mini-me welfare queens, dirty-kneed hoes, syphilitic skanks, forced to play pimped out hetero trip when I only desired you. In otro tiempo, we would fuck up dude bro fascist flanks. Anarchist Chicanx was I, Maya Guatemalteca, war refugee eres tú. We held hands during mi aborto, again during her nacimiento. Our fingers interlaced, turned tricks as we braided each other's hair. Eminem died and was reborn a mama, dropping out a gentle viento. I died without her, aislada en un laberinto without end, naked and bare. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, that's my first shitty sonnet. Okay, this one's fun. Love and basketball, also known as the necessary hunger. They should be studying her. Players 22s, mean crossover dribbles, nasty in and out dribbles, behind the back dribbles, through the leg dribbles, fierce hesitation dribbles. Instead of studying her spin moves, they watched sweat gliding, grooving down into her Cupid's bow, pooling before bouncing off onto her. Player 22's blazing blood red, sweat-drenched jersey. Instead of studying her dancing feet, shoes scuffling, flesh scraping, their eyes locked in on her hunger. Player 22's hunger radiates throughout the court, melts down defenses, deceptions, faster than butter on popcorn. Heating the arena, escapes to visit the ghetto, the barrio, the res courts, where the necessary hunger is forged. Her necessary hunger rebounds, lands on their lap, blazing hot. Scorching first their thighs, traveling upward, they can no longer conceal their own desire to hunger and be hungered for, to create something else to be, to find in each other's eyes the hunger they were longing for. Okay. Shitty sonnet number 2. I believed in the after death. In my last after-death experience, I steeled myself with shit tons of opioids and crawled ass backwards into the ER, tripping hard. I hallucinated smoking mota with my undead, deadpan elders who warned me not to drop acid with cats on my deathbed. You will regret it. They know too much. So I ingested peyote instead. Spoke with my cancer and her hungry, metastasizing children colonizing my lungs. Settler cells were like the sword and cross, except in one way. Neither good nor evil, feral families simply are. Simply put, I found purpose as I was getting nearer to the end. I refused to litter the spiritual plane with angsty ghosts. I desired to leave my body untethered to the earth, to leave it without desire, no longer hungry for what I had already overdosed on, love and its absence. Okay, so that was my shitty poems. This is hilarious. I have a poem called I Ain't Reaching Across the Aisle. It's a spoken word poem. It's really freaking long, so I'm not going to perform it, but I laughed that the co-organizers thought the end of the poem was a separate poem. So I'm like really happy now. Now I got 2 poems. Like I just thought I had this one long, rambling, political, pissed off poem. So now here's the end, and hopefully it sums up nicely certain things, I don't know. Okay. Amen. Shut the fuck up. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Serenity Prayer. Shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. Angela Davis. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you, Lena, and all of our readers. Feel free to grab food, coffee, break. We'll be back here at 1 with our lovely faculty and alumni. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you once again to all of our readers. That was wonderful. As Rachel said, we will be back at 1 p.m. for the faculty and alumni readings, so stick around. But for those of you joining us online, we'll be closing up the live stream. We'll see you again at 1 p.m. Thank you.